Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
And welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Tonight, we are talking about getting back on track with your financial goals. Joining us for tonight's episode is Todd Tresidder of the site Financial Mentor. Welcome back to our show, Todd.
Thanks for having me, Glenn.
Thanks for being here. And of course, we have the other members of the Money Mastermind Show. We have Kyle Prevost of youngandthrifty.ca, Miranda Marquit of Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, Tom Drake of the Canadian Finance Blog, and I'm Glenn Craig of Free From Broke. So before we start, if you're watching us live on our event page, there is an app there for questions. So if you have any questions about getting back on track with your financial goals, please ask them. We'd love to get to them. So some time has passed now since New Year's, the typical time of year when people set all sorts of different goals, many of them financial, which also means that by now most people have given up on their goals. So how do we get back on track is really what the question is. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the things you want to distinguish is the difference between a New Year's resolution and a goal. So you're setting up with, a few months into the new year, and, New Year's resolutions easily get dropped because they're not serious. The key on having a goal that you're going to stay with is you've got to be committed to it. It's the commitment process that's really the key to achieving the goal. If you're not committed to it, if it's just something whimsical that you throw up there, then 3 months later you're going to be off track.
Well, I think one of the problems that I like how you talk about the difference between a resolution and a goal, because I think a lot of the problems a lot of people have is they're like, oh, well, I've got to make a resolution because it's New Year's, and here are some nice things that I think would be great. But like you said, they're not committed. They're just like, these are nice things that would be great. It would be great if I could look this way, or it would be great if I could have this much money, or it would be great if I could pay down this debt. But that's not the same thing as saying, I am going to do this.
Yeah, when you set a goal, you're going to pay for it. And you have to be clear that, whether you choose to do the goal, you choose not to do the goal, you pay the price. And so when I'm looking at goals, I'm always deciding, am I willing to pay that price? Because sometimes I'm not willing to.
So how do you figure out that commitment? Where does that come from exactly?
It's got to be something that you truly care enough about to pay the price for. So as an example, take all our businesses that we're building, our websites. We all pay a price for those things. They're a lot of work, and so you've got to be committed to it. It's got to be something you truly want, that you care enough to do about. And it's got to be in alignment with your values, what's inside of you.
So, let's say we have that commitment. Many people, they really do want to make a change, and then they make a goal, be it a resolution or a true goal, but it doesn't work. We fall off that track. Maybe let's talk about some things that make us fail of our goals in the first place. Why don't we keep going with our goals?
Why doesn't somebody else jump in, Glenn? I had a sound problem with you. Your sound dropped in and out.
Okay.
So I think one of the reasons is life tends to get in the way. I started out this year doing really great with my exercise goals, for example, but then last week there were two school delays and 3 school closings because of the weather, and I couldn't exactly go to the gym because now I had my son with me instead of having that ability to go to the gym. So I think sometimes, this week I'm back on track and that's great, but I think sometimes life just sort of gets in the way and you find these other little things kind of push, and like Todd says, it's like, well, you have a price to pay, and what are you going to do? And it's like, well, am I going to neglect my son, or am I going to go to the gym? So it's kind of, you kind of have to make a trade-off. I think that happens a lot to people.
So Miranda, you bring up a really excellent point, because if you look at what you just said, what you really said underlying that is that your commitment to your son is greater than your commitment to your health goals.
Yes, thanks.
Well,
now I sound like an awesome mother.
That,
and we were just lamenting what a terrible mother I am.
Right. But those are goals in alignment with being a mother, right? You're gonna side to your son before you side to yourself. And so it's the same thing with your financial goals. People have conflicting objectives with their money, and you pretty much know where a person's values lie and what they're committed to by how they spend their time and their money. And so you'll see somebody that's driving the flashy car, but they have no bank account. And that's an expression of a commitment to your lifestyle goals of immediate lifestyle over your long-term financial security. And so there's a fun saying, which is judge by results, often harsh, always fair. If you look at the results that somebody produces, you can tell with absolute clarity what their commitment is.
I like that one.
Yeah, I think another reason why the goals tend to fail is because people don't get specific enough in their goals. They just have kind of a generic goal. So maybe I just want to lose weight. That's the goal. But they don't actually make a concrete, specific goal that they're shooting for. It might be better to make a specific goal of I want to lose 20 pounds by 30th or something like that. And beyond just being a generic goal, maybe they don't really make an action plan of any kind in order to achieve that goal. So that could be a big stumbling block as well.
That's a good point about having a deadline, because if you don't have the deadline in there, then it's a lot easier to put it off. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. Well, is that 2 weeks from now or 2 years from now? So you can always kind of just push it off.
Well, and I like how you talk about making a plan. You can just say, well, I want to do this, but how will you do it? And I think mapping that out really helps you stay on track. I think goals are going to fail if you don't sit down and think about, well, how do I make this happen? Is it even realistic to make this happen? Like Tom just said, I mean, you're not going to lose 10 pounds well, you could lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks, I guess, but you'd have to be really determined. But looking at it and saying, well, how is this going to happen, and can I really make this plan? I think that Peter makes a good point with the planning.
Yeah, so playing off that, a goal without a plan is just a dream. It's the plan and taking action on that plan that converts something from a dream into a goal. It's those action steps. And there's two different ways of doing a plan, and they're both acceptable. One is you can do it by just taking the next logical step, or you can do it by reverse engineering your way to the goal. And they're different for different people. Some people, reverse engineering your way to the goal is a bit over analytical. It happens to be my style because I'm very analytical. For other people, they get stuck in analysis paralysis, and so they're better off with just taking the next logical step. And then from there, they take the next logical step and so forth, and just getting into action immediately. And so there's really two ways to work with your plan.
Now let's talk about that. I mean, what do you mean by reverse engineer? I mean, I understand what the terminology is, but for somebody who's out there maybe trying to figure out their goals, what should that mean to them?
Well, let's say you have a goal of having, I'm just making one up right on the spot here, $1,000 extra by the end of the year. And you say, okay, I've got 9 months between now and the end of the year. That works out to $110 a month. And so you sit here and reverse engineer how you're going to create $110 extra a month. You can either raise your income or you can lower your expenses. And so then you go through and you say, well, raising my income between now and the end of the year is going to be tough because it's my job and I don't get a pay raise. So now how am I going to cut $110 a month of expenses out of there? And then how am I going to take that and translate it over into the savings column? That would be an example of where you start with the goal and then you break it down chunk by chunk into specific action steps you can follow to get the exact outcome you're seeking.
So it's like you're taking your goal and you're working backwards from there to where you are now, and how you're going to map that out for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So you're starting with where you are now, then you look at where you want to be, and then you define the gap. So there's a gap between where you are now and where you want to be. And then you reverse engineer how to bridge that gap.
Now let's talk about that other technique you said, doing the next logical step. It almost sounds a little like a lot of people talk about common sense, right? And there's a big gap in what common sense is. A lot of people have different types of common sense. So how does a person know what the next logical step actually is? You talk about analysis paralysis. I think a lot of people get stuck, or they maybe give up a little bit of hope. So how do they know what the next thing they need to do, if you've already fallen off that goal?
Well, let's take wealth building as an example, right? There's all kinds of seminars out there, weekend boot camps and stuff. And then there's a certain following of these people that are just boot camp junkies, and they love to go to all these seminars and get the seminar high and go from event to event, but they never produce any results, right? And then you'll take the person who just says, you know what, I'm going to start buying a house a year, right? Like, I'm going to get wealthy, I'm going to buy a house a year, and I'm going to do it that way, and I'm going to fix them up, and I'm going to do this. And so then they just figure out how to get a house this year. And then next year they figure out how to get another house. And then they run out of money and they say, oh, I guess I better figure out how to use other people's money to go get more houses because I still have to stay on my track for a house a year. So then they figure out how to find investors. And they just kind of step forward piece by piece by piece to get their goal without going into some big involved analysis and planning and everything like that. There's just kind of a logical step to it.
No, I mean, buying a house, that's a pretty big step for, I think, most people in general. But it sounds a lot like you're just saying, hey, look, just kind of do the next thing that'll push you forward, and then things will at least be in movement and your goals will be that much closer, or at least you're taking action on what you want your goals to be.
Yeah, but Buckminster Fuller has a principle he teaches, which is called precession. And the idea is that if you drop a pebble into the water, which way do the waves go? They go straight out at 90 degrees to the path of the pebble, right? Then they hit the boundaries of the water, they bounce back, and they go back to the source. And that's what happens when you take action. If you take that next logical step, what happens is you learn. Things change. Stuff happens that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't taken that next logical step. So then you go to the next logical step from there, and you keep going. And if you just tried to analyze it and figure it all out, then none of that would be happening, and you wouldn't be growing, you wouldn't be moving forward. And so it's a different philosophy. The key when doing that approach is you have to be really clear about risk management. I've seen people take that approach and they don't apply proper risk management, and they get themselves in big trouble.
How does one go about that? I mean, there's all sorts of different goals. I mean, not everybody is going to be a real estate guru and own tons of property. But how do you take that concept of risk management and apply it maybe to just general financial goals?
Well, this goes back to principles of growing wealth, right? The growth of your wealth is determined by the mathematical expectancy of your process. And so what governs mathematical expectancy is just as much your downside losses as much as your upside gains. And so you have to always pay attention to what's your downside when you're taking any approach, and you have to manage that risk to the downside. So I'm going to try to make one up on the spot. I'll give an example when I got into real estate. When I got into real estate, I bought large apartment buildings. And people would say, ooh, that's risky, right? It's crazy. But I figured out that I could do it on non-recourse financing, and so I could buy a large apartment building with about the same risk as buying a house because I'm signing for about the same value. The down payment of what I put in the apartment building was all I had at risk, which was about as much as I'd have at risk if I bought a single-family home. And so I was controlling more units, more cash flow, had more going on with less capital, and there was risk management because my downside was controlled. It was a non-recourse loan. The most they could ever get was the down payment. Whereas if I bought a whole bunch of houses, I'd have much more exposure to my personal assets. So that's an example of applying a risk management principle. I don't know if I lost you on that one. Sorry.
Well,
No, please.
Well, I think part of it, though, is knowing how much you can handle and knowing where you stand. Todd looked at it and he said, well, this is where I stand and this is what I can handle. For the rest of us, like maybe investing or starting investing, and one of the things that I talk about when we start investing is just take $25 and go invest in an index fund, right? If you want to start investing, that's the next logical step. Take your $25 and just go invest in an index fund and then start learning about stuff. And I think that being able to look at where you're at and say, well, what's realistic and what can I afford to lose is part of that risk management as well. Todd said, well, I can afford to lose as much as this down payment. And that's where he stopped, right?
Yeah. And another principle of risk management would be proper insurance, or you can use an entity that holds the real estate, or you can, get proper liability insurance on the property. And so you create various boundaries of risk to control your downside risk so you don't get a waterfall effect. So I'll give you an example. This one's not good. Another example of risk management is just having the knowledge to understanding of what you're getting involved with, like you were talking about, Miranda. Knowledge is a form of risk management. You have to know what the heck you're doing.
So for some people, I mean, let's say it's not real estate, but whatever it is, you don't even necessarily have to start putting X money here or there, but just reading up on different techniques or trying to look into what it is that you're trying to accomplish and doing some research on it is a valuable first step or early step for somebody or a way to get back on track.
Yeah, your voice cut in and out for me, but basically what I'm hearing is a due diligence process, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so a due diligence process is a form of risk management, and it's proper investment protocol. You always want to do your due diligence first before you put capital at risk.
So I got a quick question that is sort of along the same track. We're talking about the risk management and stuff, but takes off in a bit of a different direction. And being in a classroom and talking about goal setting and getting back on track and staying with your goals and stuff, can goal setting be taught and inspired? Do you think, Todd, and anyone else, feel free to chime in? Or is this something that there's a large percentage of the population that is just going to find it almost genetically impossible to set goals and stick with them?
Wow, I don't experience that, Kyle. I think anybody can set goals and experience them. That's been my experience in coaching people. I think some people have more discipline than others. Some people have greater clarity in their thinking. So when they get clear on what they want, they can figure out how to organize their lives to create it. But I think it's within anybody's reach. I have not experienced a boundary that way. I don't know what other people have experienced.
I think it's fair to say, there we go. We always talk on each other.
Every week.
Go ahead. Let's hear it.
I was going to say, I think it's not always the setting of the goals and everything that's the hard part. Just about anybody can sit down and set their immediate short-term and long-term goals, but I think the hard part is actually focusing on those goals and working towards making them happen and make them realized. Thomas Stanley, author of Millionaire Next Door, talks about how being able to focus on a goal is actually an attribute of millionaires that he studied. They were able to focus on their goal and work towards making it a success, and that kind of set them apart from other people. So I think being able to weather all the distractions that we have as far as things that are just trying to take your attention and trying to take your income, basically, and instead focus on your goals is a huge thing.
See, I think goals in general are something that, like Todd said, I think it's within everybody's grasp to do. But to a little bit what Kyle was saying, I think some people would benefit from maybe being taught some techniques to help them get through their goals, sort of like what we're talking through now. So some people might try to set up goals and they find that they're failing often, and they might not understand that, if you just break it down into more smaller achievable pieces, you can get better at it. Or if you make them more concrete, it'll help you with your goals. So I think it goes along both ways. Everybody can do it, but not everybody intrinsically has the techniques built in to create good goals. And to go to a school setting, you don't just say, here's a 20-page research paper to do. You might help a student and say, you know what, week 1, we're going to get we're going to get a thesis. Week 2, I want to have, a framework for it. And, week 3, I want 5 pieces of research material, so you can help somebody along to create those goals and the techniques for their final product.
One thing I think is important on playing off of what Pete said earlier, and it came out of that same book, Millionaire Next Door, is the importance of habits. If you can take a goal and reduce it down to 2 or 3 critical habits that you implement daily, you have much greater success of achieving it. And so that's one of the things I work with a lot, is just trying to figure out what are those critical 2 or 3 habits that will result in getting the goal if you adopt those habits. It just makes it much more achievable and much easier to stay with.
So figure out something in that goal and do it often, and often enough that it's just going to be second nature, and you're not really thinking about it to be a goal anymore.
Yeah, so let's say we go back to the beginning of this podcast and we grab Miranda's health goal. And so let's say that she adopts a habit of waking up at 5 each morning. I have no idea Miranda's lifestyle, right?
Yeah, right.
but she says, okay, I care about my health goal, and so I'm going to go to bed earlier, and I'm going to get up 5 in the morning on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so I get my 3 workouts each day because no life is going to interrupt me at 5 in the morning. And so, bam, he adopts the habit, and now it's done.
This is why I have problems, because I only work out after my son goes to school. So you've solved my problem. Now I have to just decide to get up at 5 in the morning.
Yeah, so a lot of it's,
but you're right.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, but you're right. I mean, the bottom line is now I have to decide how willing am I and how disciplined do I want to be to get up at 5 in the morning and go do this thing. It's not going to happen. But I know myself that well. But I think that's part of it too, is do you know yourself and how can you work this into your lifestyle in a way that's manageable for you? For me, it's I drop my son off at school and then I go straight to working out. So my son goes to school, I'm already in my gym clothes, I drop him off, I go straight to working out. And I do that every day. I do that 5 days a week. But of course, the downside is on days when he's got school, then I don't work out. But I think that you make a good point, is you have to look at it and say, what am I willing to do and how can I fit this into my life?
I think it's important not to feel defeated too. I remember when we talked about our New Year's resolutions episode, sort of right around that time frame, and I forget the exact statistic Pete had, but it was right on the money. A vast majority of resolutions can fail, and I think it's important not to sort of say, well, I'll wait till next year now, or I'll wait till this event in life to start again. It's sort of the theory of the best time to the best time to have planted a tree was 30 years ago, and the next best time is today. So don't wait for the next new year to kick in. Take some of what Todd said, some of what everyone else has said, and start putting it to work for you right now to make a positive difference.
Yeah, another fun one, Kyle, is making the goal really small and then just building on it. So like, using savings as an example, you start with $1 a day, and then you make it $2 a day, and then you make it $3 a day, and you start building a habit out of doing that. But you make the first round achievable. Like Miranda could have I hate to pick on you, Miranda. I'm sorry.
No, that's
just
okay.
We got the health goal.
That's what I'm here for. Everybody wants to lose weight. Everybody wants to do a health goal. It's universal. It's even more popular than money goals.
There you go. So health goals everybody can relate to. So we're playing with it. Let's say that you have a stair stepper in your house, and you just say, you know what? I wake up, roll out of bed, and I do 5 minutes on the stair stepper before I jump in the shower, because there's no reason you can't do that, right? And then you just add to it and you add to it. Or maybe you go for a walk each day for 10 minutes or 15 minutes as a break from work, because there's always a point at which your brain's just fried. You can't write another word, you're done. And so you just stand up and go for a 10-minute walk around the neighborhood, and that's a start.
It's true.
And I think to play off the habit issue here, is also the idea of friction too. Like, make it as easy as possible to do it, so that you don't have to think too much. You don't have a lot of time to say, no, I'm too tired. No, I'm this and that. Like going to the gym, it could be a matter of having all your gym clothes out already and set there and ready to go. Like for me, it used to be when I got home from work, if I sat down on the couch and put the TV on, that was it. I was done. Too much friction. It was not going to happen. But if I didn't let myself hit the couch, if I was like, if I'm going to do this, I got to do it now. I got to throw the sneakers on and go. Then I'd be okay.
My experience in working with my own goals and failures and successes with it is just prioritization. Just getting really clear on what I'm truly prioritizing. Because like you guys, it's not like I'm sitting around twiddling my thumbs and, watching TV and burning time. I'm a busy guy. And so if I'm going to have a goal, I'm adding it in, and that means something else has to be removed. And so I just have to get clear that it's truly a priority, or it isn't going to stick.
So it's also finding those things that, not necessarily fluff, but that aren't as important, that you could put aside and that you're willing to sacrifice to do what you need to do. And I was
just going to say, I'm interested in that sort of process, Todd, that you use, because I'm always interested in sort of this idea you can't continually add priorities. If everything's a priority, then nothing is. So do you have a process for identifying sort of what can be pruned? What was it one time high priority for you that has now shrunk down the scale, or is there a way of looking at it that has allowed you to focus more efficiently on new goals?
All right. Well, here's a fun one for you, Kyle. I have a process I teach called big goals, small goals, and it's not really named very well, but let me explain it for a second. So big goals are process-oriented goals. Okay, so it's stuff you can never outlive. So things like your health, your wealth, spirituality, relationships, basically all the stuff that makes life worth living is in the category of process goals, which is very interesting in of itself. That's like a whole conversation itself. And then you've got goals that I call small goals, and those are goals that you can cross off a list. So surprisingly, buying a house is a small goal because you can get it done, you can cross it off a list. Buying a car, saving $1,000. These are all small goals because you get them done, you cross them off a list. Now, here's the amazing thing about it is that the technology or process that's taught around everywhere about goal setting and goal achievement works on small goals. The process of achieving big goals is a completely different approach. And that's why wealth building is so interesting for me, because that's a process goal. And so the reason I brought that up right now is because you touched on what you said about this idea of prioritizing goals and whatnot. My experience is you can only pull off about 3 or 4 big goals, which is all those process-oriented goals. You can only pull off about 3 or 4 before everything starts to suffer. Whereas small goals, you can compartmentalize and you can do them in stints, right? And that's all that like SMART goal technology and all the other stuff you see commonly talked about. That's good for small goals. Big goals are totally different. You can only manage about 3 or 4 is my experience. It depends on the person. Well, that was a conversation killer.
Well, I was just gonna.
We're just taking it in time.
No, that was great. That's exactly it.
We're all making notes so that we remember all of this.
Basically, with the small goals, basically what you're saying is you have to say, well, what is the goal for right now, and kind of order them and say what's the top of my list now to accomplish before I start checking things off or making room for things. But with the big goals, you're kind of doing it endlessly, right?
Yeah, so I'll give
making that a lifestyle.
I'll give you an example from my own life where I had to go through this process. Is I had financial mentor. A lot of you guys know, some don't. I had financial mentor kind of live since '98, believe it or not. Right. That's how I ended up with that URL. And it was a dead site. I made every mistake in the book. It was done in frames. It was a static site. Sat there till like 2008, 2009, something like that. And when I retired from the hedge fund business, I got into the real estate side and I started acquiring apartment buildings and stuff like that. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but when I was pushing for that goal, I basically bought myself a part-time job. And it just kind of mounted up, and I didn't realize it, and I didn't want it, right? And so I had this financial mentor business sitting on the side, and I wasn't doing anything with it, and it was really starting to irritate the daylights out of me. It was like something I wanted to work with, but I wasn't achieving anything with it, and it was sitting there static. I was having problems with it, but I kept looking at my time in between the goals I was committed to, which was my workout schedule, my health. We had small children. That was when my kids were just babies. My wife. You know, it was like all these different priorities were pulling at me, and I didn't have the time to build Financial Mentor. And so I kind of looked at it, and I reached a point, and I said, what's really important to me? What do I really care about here? And the real estate portfolio, frankly, was driving me nuts. I couldn't get away from it. It was endless problems. It was a lot of management hassles. It wasn't what I imagined it was when I acquired it. It wasn't part of the plan. And I looked at it, I said, you know, I'm not okay going to my deathbed without having done Financial Mentor. I cared about it. I wanted to do something with it. And so I wasn't okay with not doing it. And so I just said, okay, I have to prioritize it. So I literally, going through this process I'm sharing with you here, I sold off my entire real estate portfolio except for the house I live in. And that was to get rid of that part-time job and to make the space in my life to focus on building Financial Mentor. And so it's no coincidence that you see I sold my whole real estate portfolio ending in about 2006. It took me 2 years to unwind it. So it was like 2005, 2006. And then you see me start to build Financial Mentor around 2008, 2009. That timing is not a coincidence. That was all intentional around this whole big goal process I'm sharing with you. But I just didn't have the time to do it otherwise.
You know, that's really interesting because it kind of brings me to my next question is, you know, how do you know at what point a goal maybe isn't worth going after anymore? How do you know if you should maybe quit or pivot off of it or do something else? How do you know if that goal is not right for you anymore?
When it requires too much discipline, like if you just keep beating yourself over the head because you're not doing it, either you truly want it, in which case you arrange your life to make it happen, or you just get rid of it and own that it's not really a priority for you. And so it's just kind of this put up or shut up sort of point. I go through this with coaching clients where part of the coaching process is intentionally that way, where you're working with a client and, it's this repetitious, every 2 weeks you've got to call. Every 2 weeks you got to call. The client's being accountable for their actions. Thankfully, everybody gets sick of it after a while, and they either own up to the goal and they produce results, or they drop it.
So along those lines, do you think it's important to do some sort of a review on your goals and maybe on your life plan or something along those lines? Maybe a weekly review or a quarterly review, or even just an annual review.
Yeah, so I keep my goals written. I have them on the desk, and then I just line stuff out as I achieve it. And so I actually operate kind of a semi-business plan that way, where I have stuff as bullet points, and they're all arranged and they're prioritized. And then I just work off of that plan, and I'm constantly reviewing it. And I would say roughly every 3 to 6 months, I rewrite it. It's not done on a specific calendar. It's done when I reach a certain goal that I was working on. Once that's done and I can cross off that whole section of the plan, then I do it, and then I go back. And then as I find new ideas and things that I want to implement, I write them in over the plan. So you'll see, like on mine, I've got stapled Post-it notes and handwritten notes and all kinds of stuff on it when it's pretty beat up. And then I'll go through and I'll reprocess the whole thing and delete what I've already done, add in the new stuff, and then I got a fresh plan going forward.
So you're constantly working on your goal and revising it and tweaking it and kind of making it yours all the time.
Yes. Yeah, you have to revisit it regularly, otherwise it's not an effective process.
And it sounds like you're almost adding things to it also, and then having to reprioritize maybe what's there also. So if you come up with some idea for a project that you're like, I got to do this, now you got to push things away and figure out what to do next.
Yeah, and that's an example of that process we were talking about earlier. You have to make room for it. So it's forcing you to look at it and say, is this truly a higher priority? Do I have to put it in front of something else? It forces you to organize things in a strategic fashion where one thing comes in front of the other, so that they sequentially lead to wherever you're trying to head. So anyway.
What I really like is that you're treating this as a process. So many of us think of goals as like the end destination. And so I like the idea of it being a process that you're constantly improving on, because another thing about the process is you can start the process anytime. Too often we get hung up on the goals like, oh, well, when this happens, then I can do this goal. Or when the new year comes around again, I'll make my new resolution. Or we have all, with the goal, we have this idea that it's the end. And I like that you have this process, that it's ongoing. You can start it anytime and you can tweak it, and you're making progress as you go. So if you get off track, you haven't failed. You just need to tweak it a little bit and move on and continue moving forward. And I like that kind of mindset better than the idea of this is the goal and I achieve it or I don't.
The other thing I really like about it, Miranda, is that it gets everything out of my head and in a place so I don't have to remember stuff. So like all these ideas that are flitting through my head, there's a place to store them now and organize them. Whereas before, they would just get lost. They'd come in, they'd go out.
And I like that there's some sort of like reconciliation between your goals too. Like you look at one thing and you go, okay, this is new, and it's okay that this goes to the top of the list and that this doesn't get done now. It's not like you're juggling 1,000 plates and wondering why you're not doing everything. You're saying, well, okay, the focus here no longer has to be top priority. It's okay that it's not maybe going to be the next thing that's done, because we're going to do this instead. Whereas I think a lot of people have a lot of different parts of goals, and they get a little bit lost and maybe lose a little bit of momentum because they want to do all these different things, and they don't prioritize everything and give it its necessary energy to get done.
Yeah, and so sometimes stuff just drops off the list. Like it's no longer valid, it's no longer a priority, it just vanishes. things change.
So to cross off a to-do isn't necessarily a reason to do it. Yeah. No, because some people, they get so obsessed. I have to do this. This is my goal. I'm going to do it no matter what. And it's like, well, all right. I mean, but why? And then you step back and it's like, well, you're right. Maybe this is more important than that. Just to say that you've achieved this is not necessarily an achievement. It's just you're crossing something off to say that you did something. It doesn't mean as much to you as you thought it would.
Well, and the other thing, too, is you want to think in terms of big goals and milestones. So you set it up and structure it so you've got all these milestones along the way so you can feel the progress towards the bigger goals you're setting for yourself.
And with those milestones, are you also looking backwards at what you've already achieved as sort of like a momentary pat on the back, like look where I've gotten and this is what I've gone through? Or are you just always moving forward to the next milestone?
No, absolutely. You do look back and see what you achieved. That's part of kind of rewarding yourself or whatever. My process, I have an annual one too because, each new year, it's kind of that natural period where you want to do it anyway. That's why you guys had your New Year's show. It's just a natural thing. We look back over the year. And so that's a great place to do it and refresh the list and work with it. The other thing too, part of my process, because I teach wealth building, is you track your net worth annually, and so that's really easy to do at tax time, because you're dealing with all your statements anyway at that point. So that's the second step in the process. But then part of that, the reason it triggered what you're saying, is you have your annual review of what you achieved during the prior year.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I like the idea of a review and looking at your progress. Too often we get caught up and say, oh, I haven't done this and I still have so much to do. And we focus so much on what we haven't done and what we wish we had done that we forget to really recognize how far we have come. And I think that's important to look back and say, well, okay, maybe I didn't do everything I thought I wanted to do, but I've made progress and I'm in a better place than I was before. And I think that's worth looking back on and celebrating and giving you a little fuel to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I'm playing with a new concept now. This is the first year I've tried it. I read the book Essentialism. I don't know if you guys have read that book.
I haven't finished it, but I've gotten a good ways
really
through
good.
it.
I like it.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. It's particularly applicable for, all of us being in the technology, dealing with technology and blogging and social media. There's an endless pile of stuff you can do, and there's always more than you can ever accomplish. And so the premise is you want to boil it down to just the essential stuff, which I've always been a fan of anyway. But this year, I worked with my goals around just the essential goals, like what are the ones that are really going to move the business forward this year, as opposed to setting like, subscriber goals and traffic goals and all the usual stuff I used to do. I said, what are the really essential goals? And it came out very different this year. So I'll see how it goes. It's a little experiment.
Yeah, I'd like to hear how that turns out and how that's different from how you planned your goals prior to that. I know that book is very interesting in the way that it talks about how, I think it mentions a lot of what we've already talked about in that, there's only so much time to do things, so you do have to figure out what it is that you want to do, and you just kind of like got to let other things just go because it's not all that important. You find those few key items that you really need to go after. So, a person, they're falling off of their goals. They really need to get back on their feet. Maybe not get back on their feet, but they got to get back into their goal. So how do they get back to setting an effective goal that they can achieve year round? Like what are some effective goals even for people to set? Maybe people aren't even trying to go after the right things.
Well, again, it has to be a reflection of your values. If it's not what's inside of you, it's not going to work. I mean, you don't just set goals because it's an intellectually interesting thing. It's like you're trying to achieve something you truly care about and you're willing to pay the price to get. So I really think it goes back to understanding what's inside you and how you try and express that in the world.
Do you have a process for identifying that with your clients' talks? I find often when we're asked to self-identify goals, what we're actually doing is identifying what we think other people's goals would be for us, if that makes sense, or what society expects our goals to be. So do you have sort of a process or sort of I don't know, an approach that has allowed you to help people sort of zero in on what's really important to them at the end of the day?
Yeah, Kyle, one of my favorites is tolerations. And the reason for that, it's a back door into what's inside of you. Like if you just said, hey, what are my values, right? Like it's just a dead end, right? Your mind just shuts down. It's, you know, how are you going to come up with that? You think you have some ideas, but basically all you're going to do is play in your brain the same old nonsense that you always play in your brain because you think you know yourself. Whereas tolerations are really fun because what they do is they come in the back door, but they tell you a much clearer answer. Because behind every toleration is a value that's being violated. That's why you're tolerating it. And so, like, let's say you're stuck in traffic, right? And you're just anxious and you're irritated. Like some people, traffic drives nuts. Me, as an example, right? Because it's just so wasteful. It's so stupid, and it's just irritating to be stuck behind people. It just drives me nuts, right?
Let's do that.
And so you can tell what my values are, right? Right there. I pressed it. And it's the same thing. You can look at anything you tolerate, and it'll tell you something about what's inside of you, what your values are. So it's a great back door where your mind doesn't play tricks on you.
And it also sounds like, you know, sometimes we set up goals in such a way that we're not looking at key issues. You know, so like you could come up with different ways. Like if I make a lot of money, maybe the traffic won't be so bad. You know, but maybe the best thing in your life is to just get out of that traffic. Like find a job somewhere else, move, do whatever, and just really kind of switch up what it is that you want to look for based on your own values and like you said, tolerances, as opposed to like really just kind of trying to jump over them, but really these things still bug you day to day.
Yeah, or like for me, it's like being a little less of a hyperactive idiot and you know, finding more peace of mind inside of me and just being present to the moment and letting go of it because you're stuck. What are you going to do? It's stupid to get upset. You're only killing yourself. So anyway, there's a lot of different ways to interpret it.
I like that idea of tolerances. You know, what are you willing to put up with and whatnot, and you know, why you even bother putting up with it then? You know,
Yeah, because I'm willing to try any approach that's different than that sort of value self-talk that you talked about, Todd, because I find that is we're so bombarded with magazine covers on newsstands and like 10 new tricks to a new you and the same 6 tricks for hardcore abs that you saw 57 times now and all these different things. Like, yes, everybody knows that a plank will eventually lead to abs, but beyond that and sort of the value self-talk that you're constantly bombarded with, what I really like, I have no idea if tolerations will work, but I like the theory behind it, and it's something new. It's a different approach anyway.
Yeah. And here's another one is a fun one is just go into a bookstore, playing off of what you just said about the magazine racks, right? Go into a bookstore and just browse around and see what you're attracted to. You know, what catches your interest? What do you want to pull off the shelf? And that'll tell you something about what's inside of you.
And we got sounds because that was so good.
I was going to say, I'm always attracted to science fiction and fantasy and political thrillers, so...
Yeah. I think I want to be a knight in shining armor then.
I live in a dream world. There's no reality here.
Yeah, another one, you can look at how you spend your free time and your free money.
That's true.
You know, how you spend your free time and your free money is an expression of what's inside of you. What are your values?
So looking at like why, you know, if you love sitting around watching TV, you know, is that really something that's an expression of who you are? Do you really love what you're doing, or is it just maybe you know, biding your time till you find that one thing you're passionate about? I guess.
Like a path of least resistance, but not really something that you're truly striving for.
Yeah. Yeah.
If somebody's doing that, then I would say, well, what's that giving you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd have to ask, well, what are you getting from that? Oh, nothing. Well, no, it's giving you something, otherwise you wouldn't do it. So what is it giving you? And you know, in that case, the answer is usually escapism, right? It's just it's a way to detune and tune out and just chill out. So, you know, behind everything you're doing, you've got a reward, otherwise you wouldn't do it. And sometimes the rewards are rather perverse.
There you go. Watching TV is perverse.
No, I didn't say that.
You heard it here, folks.
Actually,
Watching too much
depends
is.
on what you watch, right?
Watching TV. No, but
Depends
it's
on what you watch, Miranda.
Well, no, I mean, you're right, though. I mean, you would you got the rewards of watching TV, and I mean, I like to relax and enjoy myself as much as the next person, but at the same time, you know, how much time do I really want to devote to that? And the answer is usually not more than an hour a day.
well,
The
yes.
amount of time it took me to buzz through House of Cards, which was one weekend, that was perverse. I'd feel comfortable saying that.
I love House of Cards. I still haven't watched season 3 though. I need to get that done.
Well, then, you see, you're not a true addict. Like, I just hooked that up to my
Obviously
veins.
not. Obviously not.
Well, that
doesn't
kind of goes.
value it as much.
It's like, how rewarding are the rewards? Like, what really are you getting out of it? Like Todd said, you know, yeah, I love some good TV too. You know, give me some Game of Thrones or some Walking Dead, and you know, I'm happy. But you know, I know that I really enjoy those, and I take the time out to make sure that I can kind of watch those programs because that's what I want to do. But I can let other things fall to the wayside. You know, I don't need to watch all this other stuff. And I understand that it has like this almost addictive quality that kind of puts me into the zombie hole. Not a Walking Dead zombie hole. I'm just staring at the TV zombie hole. You know, that I'm not getting very rewarded out of. You know, so it's like I have to let that stuff go just so that I can focus on the stuff that I do want.
But I
Oh,
think
you can even look at what TV you're attracted to, right? The TV you're attracted to tells you something about you.
I'm
Is this
getting
zombie?
ready for the end of the world.
he wants to go buy a gun and blow zombies' brains out. No, well, I was just going to say, as part of it, I think there's also a social component because as Kyle was sitting here and talking about, you know, watching House of Cards and stuff, I'm like, I got to watch season 3 because then I can talk to Kyle about watching House of Cards. And it was our friend Rob Engine up in Canada. I mean, there was a time when we were reading the Song of Ice and Fire books, and we couldn't do spoilers. We couldn't talk about it because on our little group, there were people who hadn't read the books and were watching the show. And so Rob and I had our own little side club, and we talked about the books. And I think that kind of goes into it too, this social thing where I want to be able to talk about these things with other people. And I think that plays into it as well. And is part of the wider financial issue of, well, why are you spending money? Why do you have these goals? Well, because everybody else does and you're supposed to. And I think, you know, TV can even be part of that. And any other goal you have or any other way you're spending your time.
Well, and connecting, you know, television as an example, we don't want to pick on TV here anymore than we want to pick on Miranda's exercise goals, right?
No, we can pick on TV more, I think.
But
It's a little less sensitive, maybe, and it can handle it.
you know, any of these things can serve as a distraction from achieving what we really set out to achieve. Sometimes we'll use them as a form of resistance or avoidance, you know, just to get away from having to deal with the difficulty of achieving our goals. Because let's face it, you know, they're difficult. And anytime you try to move your life forward, you face resistance. And so all these avoidance mechanisms you want to be aware of because you can use those to stay away from your goals.
And understanding that resistance and understanding that it's there is a valuable thing as well, because we don't always see that, you know, or that, you know, why we're doing the things we do. So sometimes you really have to learn to take a step back and look at the things we're doing and see if they attach to our life plans and goals.
Yeah. I think the key thing here, and it comes through in everybody, you know, is just acceptance, right? You're human. And, you know, some of the stuff's hard. And so just, you know, life's short, enjoy it, and go ahead and set your goals and achieve what you set out for, but, you know, don't worry about it too bad.
That sounds good. And I think that leaves a good point here. We've done a really great job, and Todd's really given us some great things to think about. As you could tell by some of the pauses in the show, we're just kind of wrapping our heads around what he's saying. But this is a good point in our show where we like to go around and part of our wrap up is to say a final word on our topic for the day. So, Kyle, if you'll start us off on the final word on getting back on track with your financial goals.
I know a goal that, or sort of a strategy that's helped me get back on track before is talking to people that are either supportive of me or part of the same community that's chasing the goal I am. It's good to sort of be held accountable to some extent with people that are like-minded and have similar goals and values to you.
And Miranda, your final word on getting back on track with your financial goals?
I think it's really important to view it as a process like Todd was talking about, but also look at it as a journey and your progress that you're making. Your goal should be to become a better person or improve your financial situation, your overarching, I guess, purpose, so that you can look back and say, well, am I doing better than I was before? And if I'm not quite doing as well as I wanted, let's celebrate the progress I've made and then tweak so that I can keep moving forward. But I think the important thing is to keep moving forward and always be striving to improve.
Peter, your final word on getting back on track with your financial goals.
Okay, well, my final word is this: to sit down and just don't allow yourself to drift through life and not even think about the goals. Watching House of Cards and Walking Dead and all the other things. Sit down and think about what you want your envisioned future to be. What your major priorities in your life need to be. Maybe it's relationships with your family, with your spouse, career, or whatever it may be. And then think about where you are currently, your current reality. And then set aside specific commitments and actions that you're going to do in order to reach those goals. Actually set a plan in action. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting down every few months and setting new goals and then letting them sit and never happens. So review your goals on a regular basis, and you'll be on a much better path.
And Tom, what's your final word on getting back on track with financial goals?
Well, setting goals is great, but when you set the goals, eventually some of them are going to fail. So don't let the failure kind of get in your way. You got to sort of own up to it and either change your goal, maybe change the timeline, make it more real of a goal. But failure is going to come with setting goals, and you got to kind of get around that and not let it get you down and put you in a worse position.
And Todd, if you'll close out our final word on getting back on track with financial goals.
Well, I'll close out where I opened, which is get clear on your commitment. If you're not clear on your commitment, you're not willing to pay the price to get the goal you set out to, you're not going to get it, and you're just kidding yourself. So you have to be clear that it's enough of a priority and set those priorities and organize your life to reflect those priorities and set yourself up for a win. Because if it's a big enough goal and you don't set it up that way, you're not going to get it and you're just going to frustrate yourself.
Todd, where can our audience find out more about you and Financial Mentor and the things that you do online?
Everything's at financialmentor.com. So that's my home base. And give away a lot of free content, and I've got a bunch of free bonuses for subscribers. So hopefully they'll come over and join the community.
Definitely, everybody should head over there and check out Financial Mentor. Todd, thank you for a wonderful show. I think I'm going to be scratching my head for a little while, getting absorbing all of that information. It was really good stuff. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you everybody out there for paying attention to the Money Mastermind Show. Make sure you check out the Money Mastermind Show, moneymastermindshow.com, and stay active with our community there. And for everybody else out there, good night, and until next week, be good with your money.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Google+.